There is a name you still cannot say out loud without something inside your chest tightening. Not dramatically, not the way it happens in movies where someone falls to their knees. It is quieter than that, more private. It happens while you are driving and a certain song finds its way through the speakers. It happens when you catch a scent that has no business still living in your memory but does, stubbornly, like a guest who refuses to leave. It happens at 2 a.m. when the whole world has gone still and your mind decides, without your permission, to replay a conversation you had with this person 3 years ago, 5 years ago, maybe longer. You remember the exact tone in their voice. You remember how the light fell across the room. You remember details you never consciously chose to memorize, and yet there they are, preserved with a kind of painful precision that makes you wonder if you are holding on to them or if they are holding on to you. And here's what makes this so confusing. You are not a fool. You know this person was not perfect. Maybe they hurt you. Maybe they chose someone else. Maybe they slowly disappeared from your life in a way that left no clean wound, just a dull ache that never fully resolved. You have tried everything. You have deleted photographs. You have written unsent letters. You have told yourself firmly and rationally that it is over, that you deserve better, that it is time to move forward. And still, something in you will not release. Something in you circles back again and again to this person like a compass needle that has lost true north and locked onto a false signal instead. Most people will tell you this is love, that what you are feeling is the residue of a deep romantic connection that simply has not faded. And I understand why that explanation is appealing, because it dignifies the pain. It makes the suffering feel noble. But I want to offer you something different tonight, something that might unsettle you at first, but will, if you stay with me, change the way you understand not only this attachment but yourself at the deepest level. What keeps you tethered to this person is not love. It never was. What keeps you tethered is something Carl Jung identified over a century ago, something that operates beneath conscious awareness, something that uses the image of another person as a container for the parts of yourself you have never been able to face. And until you understand what is really happening, you will keep mistaking the signal for the source and wondering why you cannot move on from someone who, in many ways, you have already lost. You have been carrying this longer than you think. Not just since the relationship ended, or since the friendship dissolved, or since whatever happened between the two of you reached its breaking point. The attachment you feel did not begin with this person. They activated something. They walked into a room inside your psyche that had been waiting for years for someone to enter. And when they did, every unfinished thing you have ever felt about yourself, about your worth, about what you deserve, about the version of you that never got to exist, rose to the surface and wrapped itself around their image. That is why it feels so impossibly heavy. That is why no amount of rational thinking can dissolve it. You are not grieving a person. You are grieving a piece of yourself that you placed inside of them. And now that they are gone, it feels like that piece left with them. I want you to sit with that for a moment, because I know it is uncomfortable. The idea that what you feel might not be about them at all can sound almost insulting at first, like someone is dismissing the depth of your experience. I am not dismissing anything. The pain is real. The loss is real. But the mechanism beneath it is something far more ancient and far more intimate than romance. Jung called it projection, and he considered it one of the most powerful and least understood forces in human psychology. Projection is what happens when unconscious contents of your psyche, parts of yourself you cannot see, get transferred outward onto another person. You do not experience these parts directly. Instead, you experience them as qualities you see in someone else. the creativity you admire in them, the strength, the tenderness, the wildness, the depth. These are not things you fell in love with in another human being. They are things that live inside you, unrecognized, unclaimed, and your psyche used this person as a screen to project them onto so you could finally feel them, even if you believed the feeling was coming from outside yourself. I once spoke with a woman, I will call her Sarah, who had spent nearly 4 years unable to let go of a man who had left her after a brief relationship. They had been together for only 7 months. By any external measure, the relationship should not have held the kind of gravity it did. But Sarah described it as the most alive she had ever felt. She told me about a specific evening they had spent together in late autumn, sitting on the fire escape of his apartment in the cold, sharing a cigarette she did not even want, just to have a reason to stay close to him. She said that in that moment she had felt completely herself for the first time. Not performing, not editing, not managing someone else's perception of her. Just existing. And when the relationship ended, she said it felt like that version of herself disappeared. She could not access it anymore. She kept going back to him, not physically, but mentally, emotionally, because some part of her believed that the person she had been in his presence could only exist in his presence. That is not love. That is projection. Sarah had spent her entire life constructing a persona, a carefully managed exterior self that was pleasant, agreeable, measured, safe. She had learned early, as many of us do, that certain parts of herself were not welcome. Her intensity, her raw honesty, her desire to be seen without filters. These qualities were discouraged in her family, punished in her early friendships, and slowly pushed beneath the surface until she forgot they were there. When she met this man, something in him gave her unconscious permission to let those parts surface, but she did not recognize them as her own. She attributed them to the relationship. She thought he made her feel that way. And so when he left, she experienced it not as the loss of a partner, but as the loss of herself. That is why she cannot move on. You cannot move on from yourself. Jung wrote something that I keep returning to, a line that sounds simple on the surface, but gets deeper the longer you sit with it. He said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Most people read that quote and think it is only about negative qualities, the things that bother us in other people reflecting our own flaws. But the principle works in both directions. Everything that captivates us, everything that magnetizes us, everything we find irresistible in another person can also lead us to an understanding of ourselves. The qualities you adored in this person, you cannot release. The ones that made you feel like they were somehow more alive, more real, more vivid than anyone else. Those qualities are not their exclusive property. They're aspects of your own psyche that you have never owned. Jung called these disowned aspects the shadow. And the shadow does not only contain darkness. It contains every part of you that was too bright, too intense, too wild, too vulnerable, too authentic to survive the process of socialization. The shadow holds your gold as much as it holds your grief. This is the revelation that changes everything, and I need you to hear it clearly because it will restructure how you understand every intense attachment you have ever formed. When you cannot move on from someone, it is almost never because they were your perfect match. It is because they were your perfect mirror. They reflected something back to you that you cannot see on your own, something essential, something alive, something that your conscious identity had edited out of the story of who you are. And when you lost them, you did not just lose companionship or affection. You lost the only access point you had to a part of yourself that you desperately need, but have never learned to reach directly. This is why the grief feels disproportionate. This is why people around you who do not understand will say things like, "It has been 2 years, you need to let it go," and You want to scream at them because they do not grasp what you are actually carrying. The weight is not about one human being. The weight is about the unlived life inside you that briefly surfaced in their presence and then went dark again when they left. Jung had a specific term for this kind of projection in romantic context. He called it the anima in men and the animus in women. The contrasexual archetype, the inner image of the opposite energy that lives within your unconscious. When you encounter someone who matches this inner image closely enough, it does not feel like meeting a person. It feels like recognition. It feels like coming home. It feels like fate. And, in a certain sense, it is, but not because this person is your destiny. Because they are carrying your projection, and your psyche has mistaken the projection for the person. There is an old Greek myth that captures this with extraordinary precision. The story of Narcissus is usually told as a warning about vanity, about a beautiful young man who fell in love with his own reflection in a pool of water. But that is a shallow reading, and I think the myth is about something far more psychologically profound. Narcissus did not know it was his own reflection. He genuinely believed there was another being beneath the surface, someone beautiful and mysterious and just out of reach. He kept leaning closer, trying to touch, trying to connect, and the image kept dissolving every time he reached for it. That is exactly what happens when you project your unlived self onto another person. You reach for them. You try to get closer. You try to merge with them. But what you are actually reaching for is yourself. And you cannot grasp yourself by grasping another person. You can only lean in so far before the image breaks apart. And then you are left staring at water, wondering why the most real thing you have ever felt just vanished. I want to apply this directly now, and I want to be specific, because ideas only change lives when they land in the body, not just the mind. Think about this person you cannot let go of. Think about the quality in them that haunts you the most. It might be their confidence. It might be their ability to be direct, to say what they meant without apology. It might be their freedom, the way they seem to move through life without the weight you constantly carry. It might be their warmth, a particular way they made people feel valued, a generosity of spirit that you experienced as rare and irreplaceable. Whatever that quality is, I want you to ask yourself something honest. Where in your own life have you been unable to express that exact quality? Where have you suppressed it? Where have you told yourself, consciously or unconsciously, that you are not allowed to be that? Maybe for you it looks like this. You fell in love with someone who was fearlessly creative, who painted or wrote or made music without worrying about whether it was good enough. And you have spent your whole life editing yourself, holding back, waiting for permission to create. You placed your creative self inside them, and when they left, your creativity went silent again, and now you mistake missing them for missing art. Or perhaps you were captivated by someone who was emotionally open, who could cry in front of others, who could say, "I am afraid," or "I need you," without flinching. And you have never allowed yourself that kind of vulnerability because somewhere in childhood, you learned that emotional openness was weakness. So you outsourced your vulnerability to this person. And when they disappeared, you felt emotionally sealed off again. And you call that heartbreak, when really it is self-abandonment. There is another version that shows up not in romance but in friendship, or even admiration from a distance. Maybe it is someone you knew in passing, a mentor, a public figure, someone who represented a way of being that felt magnetic to you. You think about them more than you should. You idealize them. You feel a pull that does not make rational sense. And the pull is your unconscious telling you that they are carrying something of yours, some unlived potential, some identity you put away in a drawer and forgot about, until this person reminded you it existed. The signal is not about them. It is about you. It has always been about you. If you are recognizing yourself in this, I want you to do something small but important right now. Leave one word in the comments. The word is mine, not as a claim on another person, but as a reclamation. A quiet declaration that what you have been seeking in someone else belongs to you. It always did. Now that you see it, the question becomes, what do you do with it? And this is where most psychological content fails you, because it names the wound but does not walk you through the healing. I have no interest in leaving you stranded with a diagnosis and no direction. So, I want to share with you what I have learned, not just from studying Jung, but from watching this process unfold in real human lives, including, at certain points, my own. The first thing that needs to happen is not action. It is grief. Not grief for the person you lost, although that is part of it, but grief for the version of yourself that you abandoned long before you ever met them. This is the grief no one talks about because it does not have a name in ordinary language. You are not mourning a death. You are mourning a life that never got to be lived. Jung called the process of recovering these lost parts individuation, the slow and sometimes painful journey of becoming whole by integrating what has been split off from consciousness. And the first stage of individuation is always confrontation with what you have lost, not out there in the world, but inside yourself. This means sitting with the discomfort of recognizing that you gave away parts of yourself, not to be generous, not as an act of love, but because you were afraid of what would happen if you kept them. You were afraid that your intensity would be too much, that your creativity would be judged, that your softness would be exploited, that your wildness would make you unlovable, and so you handed these qualities to someone else and loved them for carrying what you could not. The grief is important because it is honest. It strips away the romantic narrative and replaces it with something truer. And truth, even when it hurts, is always the beginning of freedom. There is a concept in neuroscience that supports this. The idea that unresolved emotional experiences get stored not just in memory but in the body, in the nervous system, as patterns of activation that replay whenever something reminds you of the original experience. This is why you feel the tightness in your chest when you hear their name. It is not just a thought. It is a somatic echo, your body remembering something your mind has tried to file away. The only way through it is not around it. You have to feel it fully. You have to let the grief move through your system without numbing it, without narrativizing it, without turning it into a story about how they wronged you or how you were not enough. Just the raw, undecorated feeling of loss. The second shift is what I call retrieval, and it is the most practical step in this entire process. Once you have identified the quality you projected onto this person, you begin the slow, deliberate work of developing that quality in yourself. Not as an imitation of them, not as a way to become them, but as a way to become you, the full version. The version that includes everything you put away. If what you admired was their courage, you start doing one small courageous thing a day. If it was their creative freedom, you start creating without an audience, without judgment, just for the act of expression itself. If it was their ability to be emotionally present, you begin practicing presence in your own life, with your own feelings, even when it is terrifying. Jung used a practice he called active imagination, which involves deliberately engaging with the unconscious through visualization, dialogue, or creative expression. You can think of it simply as having a conversation with the part of yourself you have been avoiding. You sit quietly. You bring this part to mind, the one you admired in the other person, and you ask it what it needs from you. This might sound strange, and I understand if it does, but I have watched people transform their lives through this simple act of inner dialogue. When you stop looking outward for what lives inward, the compulsive attachment to the other person begins to soften. Not because you have forced yourself to forget them, but because the energy that was flowing toward them starts to circulate back into you, where it belongs. There is a story from the ancient Hindu tradition of the Upanishads that captures this shift beautifully. A student goes to a wise teacher and says, "I have traveled to distant lands seeking God. I have searched in temples and mountains and rivers. Where is the divine?" And the teacher replies, "You are the one you have been searching for. You carried what you sought in every step you took away from yourself." That is the essential Jungian insight translated into spiritual language. The beloved you cannot release is not a person. The beloved is the self you have not yet become. And the journey is not about finding them out there. It is about finding you in here. The third shift is perhaps the most difficult, and it involves releasing the narrative. Every attachment that will not dissolve is sustained by a story. Sometimes the story is, "They were the one, and I let them go." Sometimes the story is, "If I had been different, they would have stayed." Sometimes the story is, "No one will ever make me feel the way they did." These stories are seductive because they give the pain a structure, a logic, a beginning and a middle, and an implied ending where you somehow get them back or find closure. But the stories are not true. They are constructions of the ego designed to keep you focused outward, because the ego does not want you to turn inward. The ego is terrified of what you will find if you stop projecting and start looking directly at yourself. Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." He did not say it was terrifying to face your darkness. He said it was terrifying to accept yourself, all of yourself, including the parts that are luminous and powerful, and too much for the world as you were taught to navigate it. That is what this process asks of you. Not self-improvement, self-acceptance. Not becoming someone new, becoming someone whole. If this is landing for you right now, if something in these words is reaching a place that has been locked for a long time, I want you to share this with someone who needs it. Not because I need anything from you, but because you know someone who is trapped in this exact cycle. Someone who keeps going back to a name, a memory, a version of a past that will not release them. Send them this. Not with explanation, just with presence. Let the words reach whoever needs to hear them. When you begin this work, and I mean truly begin it, not just understand it intellectually, but live it in your body and your daily choices, something starts to change that I can only describe as a quiet revolution. It does not happen all at once. There is no single morning where you wake up and the weight is gone. But there are moments, and the moments accumulate. You are sitting somewhere ordinary. Maybe it is a park bench on a Sunday afternoon, when the light is turning golden and the air has that quality of early autumn, where everything feels both ending and beginning simultaneously. And you notice something strange. You are not thinking about them. Not because you forced yourself to stop, not because you distracted yourself, but because the part of you that was reaching for them has finally turned inward and found what it was looking for. You feel something you have not felt in a long time. Not happiness exactly, not the buzzing high of infatuation or the relief of closure. Something quieter, something more real. A sense that you are, for the first time, actually here. Not halfway in a memory, not leaning into a fantasy, not orbiting a person who left. Just here in your own life, in your own skin with your own depth, and it is enough. More than enough. It is full. I knew a man, I will call him Daniel, who spent nearly 6 years entangled with the memory of a woman who had ended their relationship after only a year. He described the experience the way many people do, as if a part of him had been amputated, and he could still feel the phantom limb. He had gone to therapy. He had dated other people. He had moved to a different city. Nothing worked. The attachment followed him everywhere like a shadow he could not outrun, which, as it turns out, is exactly what it was. When Daniel finally began the work of identifying what he had projected onto this woman, what he found surprised him. It was not her beauty or her intelligence, though she had both. It was her unapologetic sense of self. She knew who she was, and she did not bend for anyone. Daniel had spent his entire life bending for his father, for his employers, for friends who did not respect him, for a world that rewarded compliance and punished authenticity. He had placed his backbone inside this woman and then wondered why he could not stand up straight after she left. The work took time. It was not romantic or cinematic. It involved small daily acts of self-assertion, saying no when he meant no, speaking up in meetings when his instinct was to stay quiet, ending a friendship that had been draining him for years, but that he had maintained out of guilt. Each of these acts was its own retrieval, its own small reclamation of the quality he had outsourced. And slowly, without any dramatic climax, the obsessive attachment began to dissolve. Not because he stopped caring about the woman. In a certain sense, he would always carry a tenderness for her, for what she had represented, for the door she had opened in him even if she never knew she was holding the key. But the compulsive quality, the desperate returning, the feeling that he could not survive without her, that faded. Because the part of himself he had been seeking in her was no longer missing, he had brought it home. Jung wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." That single sentence contains the entire architecture of what I have been describing. The dream is the projection, the beautiful, agonizing, intoxicating illusion that someone else holds the key to your wholeness. The awakening is the realization that the key has been in your pocket the entire time, and you have been too busy searching the horizon to reach into your own depths and find it. I want you to understand something about the path ahead. It will not be clean. You will have days where the old pull returns with full force, where you hear a song or pass a street corner and the whole thing floods back as if no healing ever happened. That is normal. That is not failure. That is your psyche testing the new structure, checking to see if the integration is real or just another intellectual defense. Let those moments come. Feel them fully. And then notice what is different. Notice that the wave, though intense, recedes faster now. Notice that you can feel the sadness without being swallowed by it. Notice that somewhere beneath the grief, there is a steadiness that was not there before. That steadiness is you. The real you. The one who does not need another person to exist. There will also be moments of disorientation, because when you stop projecting your unlived self onto another person, you suddenly have to face the question of who you actually are without the mirror. That question is vast, and it can feel terrifying. But it is the right question. It is the question your entire life has been building toward. Jung called this the process of individuation, the lifelong journey toward wholeness, and he believed it was the central task of human existence. Not success, not love, not happiness. Wholeness. The slow, brave, sometimes heartbreaking work of gathering every scattered piece of yourself and bringing it into one integrated life. You will not do this perfectly. No one does. But you will do it honestly, and that is enough. More than enough. Because honesty is the one thing the projection cannot survive. Once you see clearly what you were doing, once you understand that the person you could not move on from was functioning as a screen for your own unlived potential, the spell does not break exactly, it transforms. The pain becomes information. The longing becomes direction. The grief becomes fuel. And the person who once haunted your every quiet moment becomes, gradually, a teacher. Someone who showed you, through their presence and their absence, exactly where your own wholeness was waiting. Remember where we began. That moment at 2 a.m. when the house is silent and your mind circles back to a name, a voice, a memory you cannot release. I want you to go back to that moment now, but this time I want you to see it differently. That restless, circling energy is not weakness. It is not pathology. It is not proof that you loved too much or gave yourself to the wrong person. It is your psyche trying to get your attention. It is the disowned part of you, knocking on the door of your awareness, saying, I am still here. I have always been here. Stop looking for me in someone else's face and turn around. I am right behind you. When you finally turn around, when you finally face what has been waiting, you will not find perfection. You will not find the idealized version of yourself that you projected onto another human being. You will find something better. You will find someone real, someone cracked and complicated, and messy and alive, someone who has been through the fire of their own longing and came out not unscathed, but awake. And you will realize with a certainty that settles deep in your bones that this person, this imperfect, luminous, finally honest version of yourself is who you were reaching for all along. Type the words, I am what I have been seeking in the comments. Not as a hope, not as a wish, as a declaration. Let it be the first honest thing you say to yourself today. Let it be the beginning of a conversation with the part of you that has been waiting in the dark, patient and faithful, for you to finally come home. You spent so long believing the ache in your chest was about someone else. It was always about you. It was always a love letter written by your own soul, addressed to the self you had not yet become, sealed and sent through the body of another person, because that was the only way your conscious mind would open the envelope. The envelope is open now. The message is clear. And the person you have been missing is not gone. They are here. They are reading these words. They have been here the entire time, waiting not to be found, but to be finally, fully, irreversibly claimed. The deepest love story of your life was never between you and another person. It was always between you and yourself.